We've spent a lot of time this season talking about how our culture is shaped. We've consulted with experts about who's responsible for molding our culture and who should be held accountable for the dangerous impacts of our media. Today, we uncover a new piece of the puzzle. How is our culture shaping our children to be offenders themselves?
The only way to keep people satisfied is to continue giving them harder, more aggressive material. And like you said, that's what our kids are seeing. They're not seeing just pictures of breasts. That's not what porn is today. When they enter the scene, they're seeing what, users who have been watching pornography for decades now want. Like, that's the content that our kids are first being exposed to. And right now, there is a crisis of children acting out on other children. And I want to preface that with saying, no, these kids aren't monsters. They're not trying to hurt each other. They're simply acting out what they saw adults doing in these videos, that they watched out of curiosity, that they watched because it actually does impact their bodies, just like it impacts adult bodies, right? Kids are just acting out what they've been exposed to. And because of that, though, we're seeing horrific crimes perpetrated by young kids. Trauma that will last an entire life to overcome being experienced by young kids. And we have to do something about it. And that's part of why we have to hold culture accountable. These major companies like TikTok, like Snapchat, Instagram, who are allowing access, exposing our young kids to hardcore violent pornography, as well as Pornhub. We have to hold them accountable because the public health impacts are immense and it's ruining lives.
That's Dawn Hawkins, Senior Vice President and Executive Director at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Dawn has been fighting giants of all kinds on behalf of victims for years. Most recently, that giant is Twitter. In today's balanced conversation, we take a look at child-on-child crimes and ultimately answer this question. How is your child being affected by our hypersexualized culture? And why should you get involved in holding media giants accountable for the role they play in shaping our society? Without further ado, here's your host, Renia Mankarios.
Welcome to the Balanced Boys podcast. We are thrilled today to be joined by Dawn Hawkins, Senior Vice President and Executive Director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, also known as NCOSE. Welcome, Dawn.
Hello. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you. You are a firecracker. I mean, you are unbelievable. You've developed a global strategy uniting more than 300 women's rights, child advocacy, medical professionals, law enforcement, religious groups. You've included bipartisan political leadership. You've worked together to raise awareness, creating connections between all forms of sexual exploitation. You have led policy changes that have affected Google, Hilton Worldwide, Comcast, Walmart, and have touched the Department of Defense. You've just raised awareness in such a tremendous way in terms of sexual exploitation of children and others. How did you end up here?
I ask myself that question too. I think from a young age, I just saw the inequality of women and the hypersexualization and objectification of women and the impact that has on so many and their ability to progress and grow on families, etc. I actually lived in Europe, in Hungary for almost 2 years. And I was teaching English a lot and doing a lot of service projects. And I saw sex trafficking and prostitution were rampant. Sexual harassment was very common. I was harassed regularly, like walking down the street. And to me, it felt like it was all connected to this culture that was pornified. There was pornography everywhere, like on billboards, front pages of newspapers. And I just thought someone has to stand up for women's rights and for children and families. And maybe I'll just volunteer a little bit when I get back to the United States. So that's how I got involved.
I mean, and it's amazing because the work NCOSE's done has truly moved the needle. And you've taken on some of the biggest powerhouses with no fear. And we're going to talk about how you're leading a lawsuit against Twitter, the work you've done with the Dirty Dozen, and news will be coming out in February. And we want everybody to circle back with your organization and see what you guys have done. But I want to talk about first the general landscape. You know, human trafficking has become a hot topic button. Everybody now is talking about human trafficking. Do you sense that people understand what it really is? And are all of these voices helping, or do they hurt the narrative at some point?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, culture is changing and accountability is finally rolling forth as we stand up and say no more abuse and exploitation. We're not going to stand for objectification. And I'm so grateful that more people are recognizing the need to stand up against, it's like no person should have to be commodified, sold, etc. And I do think, though, some of the awareness around sex trafficking is harmful. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't help. Sorry, when statistics, for example, are exaggerated. The problem is bad enough. Like the truth and the reality is so bad, so dark, so heavy. We don't need exaggerated facts. And a lot of the stuff you see on social media around sex trafficking, those are not statistics that are
like, so what does that mean? Share more about that with us.
Yeah, there'll be like statements, there's like 1 million kids are being trafficked. There's nothing that proves that. There's so much we don't know. This is a criminal industry that's almost impossible to track. And so really I encourage everybody to just question the statistics they're seeing and hearing about sex trafficking. But really it's so much more than sex trafficking too. And I think people are finally waking up to this. It's this culture that women and children can be used, abused, and discarded, that they could just be purchased. Prostitution cannot be separated from sex trafficking. Pornography, consumption, the normalization of, like something like OnlyFans, the phenomenon of now you just being able to create your own pornographic videos and sell it on OnlyFans. It's super connected to sex trafficking and prostitution. It's all a huge web. Oh, look, I have this web behind me.
Yeah.
This is the point. You can't just fight one of them. You can't only fight sex trafficking and ignore these other issues because it will continue to explode.
But what do you say about the fact that there are a lot of young girls who, they're not being touched by anybody. They're home alone. They're young college students, young women who actually realize that they can upload a video of themselves and post it online and actually become famous or get money from that. And they may still have full control. Is that something are you worried about the culture there or the act, or, do you still consider that they're exploited?
I would say they're exploited. They're victims also. They're victims of our culture that has groomed them and told them that all their worth is, their sexuality and their body. They can't do anything else. That's a problem. And it's a symptom of our hypersexualized culture. And that's why we hold corporations accountable, because they're major drivers of culture. And if corporations have big policies that facilitate sexual exploitation, that are seeking profits off the backs of these vulnerable individuals, they should be held accountable. And that's one way to help change the narrative, that it's not empowering to, sell yourself for sex.
It's interesting because I love the angle you guys take. And I've always said corporations have to be held responsible, including the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Facebooks of the world that allow this information to live on their social media platforms. But before I talk about that, you had a tweet recently about a woman that was fired from Taco Bell for being in a porn film or video. And you said, we force these women into the sex industry just to put food on the table, and then we give them no exit opportunities. And I thought that was such an interesting, I thought it was so interesting that she was fired. And then I thought it was so interesting, your comment. Yet you're right. They're forced into the industry, and then we give them no options to leave it.
Exactly. I think the solution to this whole problem is that we hold men accountable who are the buyers, who are driving the demand for the commercial sex industry. And then we offer exit strategies and services and support for those who are trapped in the industry. That's the solution. It is simple. It is simple. People try to make it more complicated. But if a woman, a mother, she happened to be a mother who's trying to put food on the table, especially during this pandemic, can't get a job at Taco Bell, how do we expect these individuals to not have to be exploited and sold over and over again?
We're going to talk about child-on-child sexual abuse, which you called a pandemic. And I think going back 2017 is when I think you gave that presentation. We're going to talk about your work regarding Pornhub and this historic lawsuit against Twitter that you're spearheading. We'll do all of that in a minute. We'll be right back.
This balanced conversation is made possible by Brigitte and Bashar Kalai, Hallie Vanderheider, Sippy and AJ Karana, and Deepwater Productions. If you're interested in furthering our mission of facilitating balanced conversations, offering real solutions, contact us at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com.
We're back with Dawn Hawkins, Senior Vice President and Executive Director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Dawn, you are doing something that I can't believe. You are literally suing Twitter. It was shocking to me because these platforms are so strong and so powerful, and people are often afraid to take them on or to go against them. Will you talk to us, share what your lawsuit is entailing and what you're hoping will come out of it?
Yeah, for years, Twitter is a hotbed of exploitation and abuse, especially of children. They enable the sex trafficking, the production of child sexual abuse material to flourish all over their platform. And I have heard for years from parents and from victims themselves who had images of their abuse uploaded to Twitter. Twitter refuses to take it down. It's all over. Twitter is like, maybe, I would say it's the worst platform on the internet when it comes to prostitution, sex trafficking, child sexual abuse material, and pornography. It's rampant. It's rampant on that platform. And finally, they're being held accountable. We have John Doe, who is a young man when he was groomed online and enticed into sending sexual material to somebody who he thought was a peer, only to find out he had no idea who that person was. A couple of years later, they compiled all of this material and put it on Twitter. His classmates found out about it. He was being horrifically bullied. He fell into a deep depression, and thankfully, one of his classmates' mothers reached out to his mom, and she intervened. In the course of that, he had already begged Twitter to take it down. He had sent them pictures of his ID proving that he's a minor. He was 13 and 14 years old. And Twitter said it didn't violate their policies. When his mom begged Twitter said it didn't violate their policies. This is clearly child sexual abuse material. They have to be held accountable. And this is not the only story, sadly. We're hearing this from many others who had abuse material filmed and then distributed on Twitter. Twitter must be held accountable.
And do you have hope that they will be held accountable, such a powerhouse like Twitter?
Yes, it's happening right now. We're suing them. More lawsuits are to follow. More individuals are coming forward. They're finding the courage to speak up themselves. Congress is looking in. The general public, thanks to the media and podcasts like you, bringing more pressure on them. I do think that they will have to change when it comes, especially to child sexual abuse material.
One of the things that has always just irked me about these social media platforms, and this is pre-COVID, is we would say there's so much sexual exploitation. It's, they're grooming these kids, and the platforms always say, oh, we can't weed that out. It doesn't go against our policies. We can't figure it out. And then COVID struck, and all of a sudden you just say the word COVID and your post is tagged and there's a link for information on COVID, or maybe it's, if you talk about the election, it's flagged. It doesn't meet the criteria of the platforms. So it was like, they clearly can monitor content, clearly, yeah. And they certainly will get involved if they don't like the content. So why have they not gotten involved when it comes to the exploitation of children? Is it that they don't care, that it's a moneymaker for them, which makes me want to vomit? I mean, why?
I think both of those reasons are part of it. And because nobody's forced them to. No, until now, there hasn't been an outcry to say that these social media, the tech giants, are responsible for creating safe spaces online for our youth. Now they're being held accountable, and we're seeing pressure. All of the major tech companies, TikTok, social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, they've all made sweeping changes in the last 12 months for improved safety when it comes to these issues. Is it enough? Am I going to let my kids on those platforms right now? No, but they are moving that way because of the pressure from the public.
And how can the public apply more pressure? Is it following you guys? Is it...
Join us. I mean, we have so many actions. We have the ability for you to contact these tech companies directly, their executives, right from our website or Congress. We make it really easy at nsexualexploitation.org. But also you can just reach out, complain, tag them on, like when you tweet TikTok, they're listening. Surprisingly, they actually listen. And so we just ask you to join with us in speaking out about the need for a safer online space.
And that's the world we live in. It was so frustrating not too long ago. Crime Stoppers was sharing, we only talk about public safety. And one of our videos was just flagged by social media. It went against their guidelines. And literally, we only talk about public safety. Nothing's political, nothing's controversial. And I couldn't sleep that night. I was so frustrated. They wouldn't let us, place an ad. They wouldn't let us boost the video. And it was completely benign. And I was up and I was on TikTok, and I'm never on TikTok, but I was on TikTok. I couldn't sleep. And I said, all right, there's like the videos pop up for you. Like, I guess I don't use it often. And it was this girl holding like this wad of cash. And, she was saying, look how much my sugar daddy gave me. And the hashtag was sugar daddy. And so I went on TikTok and did hashtag sugar daddy. And like the hundreds of thousands of videos that are hashtag sugar daddy that show a young girl, mainly young women, with these wads of cash or their Coach bag or their Gucci bag, thanks to their sugar daddy. And I'm like, these are all okay. These are all, they don't offend any standards. They're all minors. What does sugar daddy inherently mean? But like a public safety conversation that might use, end child abuse or protection for all is like flagged as being controversial by these platforms. It just, Dawn, you just think like, what world are we living in?
I'm right there with you. Exactly right there with you. And sugaring is prostitution. And so many find themselves then trafficked. I mean, yeah, that's another big fight.
Your work with pornography is unbelievable. When we come back, I want to talk to you about what you're talking about in regards to Pornhub. We'll be right back.
The National Center on Sexual Exploitation, also known as NCOSE, are known policy changers. They have made it incredibly easy for you to get involved in the fight to end sexual exploitation. After receiving 1,000 emails per week from activists from NCOSE's campaign, Hilton's executives agreed to meet and subsequently change their policies to completely stop selling on-demand pornography in their hotels around the world. To get involved in campaigns similar to this and so much more, visit endexploitationaction.com, where you can take 5, 10, 15, or even 50 actions in just minutes.
Not too long ago, Dawn, you shared a tweet about a $600 million lawsuit filed by a Canadian victim of MindGeek who had videos of her child abuse when she was 12 years old available on Pornhub as recently as 2020. You've been very clear that while Pornhub is making these efforts, they're claiming to now self-regulate, that it's not enough.
It's a joke. It's such a joke. I mean,
what does it mean though? What does it mean that they're going to self-regulate?
They're not going to self-regulate. They are not going to do that. For a decade, they have done nothing. And I mean, I'm talking about thousands, maybe more, hundreds of thousands of videos of child sexual abuse material, of sex trafficked individuals, of rape, of non-consensually recorded and uploaded intimate images being peppered on this website, and many victims asking for this to be taken down, only to fall on deaf ears. And they're not going to self-regulate. They have known about this problem for so long, since they started. This was their business model. And I'm so happy that lawsuit, there's 3 already filed. All of the major credit card companies have stopped processing for Pornhub since December. Last week, the Canadian government has called them to account. They have a headquarters in Montreal, and they had to appear before the Canadian Parliament hearing in which they said so many lies, or they refused to answer. And they're saying now, oh, well, we're changing our policies now, so that should be enough. No way. If somebody rapes somebody, we don't say, okay, if you just don't rape in the future, that's going to be okay. No, they have to be held accountable for what the trauma and the horror they've caused. And so that's starting to happen. The online internet, the internet pornography industry is really transforming right now. Just in the last 2 months, I think all pornography is problematic. It's leading to a number of public health harms, including child-on-child sexual abuse, which we'll talk about. But having rape videos, actual rape, sex trafficking images, child images, non-consensually shared, all uploaded to these websites and then shared, downloaded, etc. It's ruining lives.
Yeah. I'm thinking as you're talking about the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, which took place many years ago, and I believe there was a legislative push after that school shooting, and my timing might be slightly off, but that media couldn't access victim images. The media doing their job will sometimes show inside or whatever, but there was a movement to protect the images of the victims, especially in that case. Why aren't we doing this online? I mean, if you have a victim, somebody that's raped online, this shouldn't even be a topic of conversation, that those victims should be protected, especially dealing with something so traumatic that's almost being live streamed and relived over and over and over again, exploited over and over again.
I can't really tell you numbers of how many people have come to me over the years I've been in this fight where their abuse was uploaded to this website and to other mainstream porn sites. And I can't say there's been nothing they can do about it. Nothing, like really no legal recourse that they have, because there was no accountability. Nobody was enforcing any regulations or rules on these companies. So that is changing. And that's part of the Twitter lawsuit. It's all the same, right?
Yeah.
Twitter and porn are not that different.
Well, and I love the fact that the movement has prohibited, you can't use a credit card, as you're saying, on some of these sites. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, cover Bitcoin too, make sure that's included, because the moment you say you can't use MasterCard, Visa, Discover, whatever, it's like, yeah, just pay with Bitcoins. And it's like, no, there can't be any point of cash exchanged or monetary value. You gave a presentation in I believe it was 2017, and you started by talking about an 8-year-old girl who was repeatedly raped by a young teen, 13 or 15 years old, who had been a pornography. He consumed a lot of pornography, I guess, and that he had the young girl's 4-year-old watch. He said this is a play, but he raped an 8-year-old. And it's like, if people don't understand the effects of pornography, I'll just quickly add one more thing. We were talking not too long ago with this woman who said, yeah, but growing up, our kids had access to magazines. It's not the same. It is not the same as like streaming pornography that is violent and aggressive, where there's sounds and movement. It's completely different than a magazine. And I think these pornography sites have this bar that they're constantly chasing. Okay, we did this, now show that. We did this, now show that. There's racism, there's abuse, and you guys do such a good job about painting the landscape. But talk to us about child-on-child sexual abuse.
Yeah, well, I will say pornography has changed over time because it changes our brains. Just since 2013, there's like 40 neurological studies about how pornography has negative impacts on our brain, how it actually changes it. The only way to keep people satisfied is to continue giving them harder, more aggressive material. And like you said, that's what our kids are seeing. They're not seeing just pictures of breasts. That's not what porn is today. When they enter the scene, they're seeing what, users who have been watching pornography for decades now want. Like, that's the content that our kids are first being exposed to. And right now there is a crisis of children acting out on other children. And I want to preface that with saying, no, these kids aren't monsters. They're not trying to hurt each other. They're simply acting out what they saw adults doing in these videos that they watched out of curiosity, that they watch because it actually does impact their bodies, just like it impacts adult bodies, right? Kids are just acting out what they've been exposed to. And because of that, though, we're seeing horrific crimes perpetrated by young kids, trauma that will last an entire life to overcome being experienced by young kids. And we have to do something about it. And that's part of why we have to hold culture accountable. These major companies like TikTok, like Snapchat, Instagram, who are allowing access, exposing our young kids to hardcore violent pornography, as well as Pornhub. We have to hold them accountable because the public health impacts are immense and it's ruining lives.
You mentioned on the NCOSE website, there are some recent victories in regards to TikTok and the hashtag shut it down.
Yeah. TikTok has made, if you asked me this time, 2020, I would have said, oh, TikTok is the worst. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but TikTok really is right now the best platform in terms of their child parental controls and the safety features they've rolled out for young users. There's still extremely problematic content on there, and we'll see if they actually implement their policies. But on paper now, their policies are the best. They just rolled them out about a month ago. So I really encourage you, as anybody watching this, turn on those controls, even adults. Like, I don't want to be bombarded with hypersexualized or pornographic images. So use the tools that we fought hard to get TikTok to roll out.
And I think those tools are on your website. I think when I was there not too long ago, you can go on and figure out how to set up parental controls on TikTok, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and a lot of the mainstream social media platforms and streaming devices.
Yeah, but oh my gosh, doesn't it hurt your head to have to
I know
these on all the platforms?
So what is your advice? You're a mom of 4. I'm a mom of 3. We do raise our kids in a digital world. And as much as we want to keep them away from this, at some point we have no choice. This is how they communicate with their friends, how they live their lives. What do you tell parents like us who are still navigating how to approach this really complicated space?
Well, we have to do the work. We have to learn. We have to be where our kids are. If our kids are on Snapchat, we should be on Snapchat too. You can't just let them loose. Use the tools available. It's hard work, but we have to do it because their entire futures are at stake. I don't want to end with this sad note, but last night I was reading about 2 suicides as a result of bullying and nude images being shared on these mainstream social media platforms from 2 really good kids. I mean, good in all the ways. Like, they had support, they were straight A's, all these things. Imagine what is happening for our more vulnerable youth. So parents, don't be too terrified. My kids are still very young. The oldest is only 7. So I'm not dealing yet with letting them on these devices themselves, but I am not going to stop them completely from being on these. I'm going to be right there with them, and I'm going to be able to help them make sense of the world. So I encourage you to do that. Protect Young Eyes is my most favorite resource. As a parent, I get so much for my advocacy from them. Like, I know what companies to tackle because
they're doing a great job. They're actually scheduled to be on our podcast this season.
Oh, good. So parents, subscribe to their email and blog. That's the best.
Dawn, you are an activist, a warrior. A lot of people care about this work, but don't want to get in the nitty gritty. It is hard. It's complicated. It's scary. It's emotional. We are thankful for you and the work of NCOSE. We are thrilled that you took the time from DC to join us. I know you're doing incredible work. We will follow what you're doing with Twitter. We're standing side by side with you and whatever it takes to hold these platforms accountable. We have a love-hate relationship with them. We love them. We need them. They've offered incredible platforms for people to use, but they also have such a dark side that we need to mitigate. So thank you for everything. How can people follow you?
Thank you. Well, I'm on Instagram and on Twitter, but I really encourage you to sign up for our emails at sexualexploitation.org because we send out action alerts weekly and we need an army of people calling on these companies to account.
And everybody can do that. Dawn, thank you so much for being on The Balanced Voice, everybody. We will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Conversation. You can find real solutions and tangible resources in our show notes at thebalancedvoicepodcast.com. To join the conversation, follow us on Instagram at The Balanced Voice Podcast and on Twitter at @BalancedVoice_. Stay up to date on Runya's work by following her at The Runya Report, and we can't wait to see you next week for another Balanced Conversation.